Oh wait, no longer greatness has arrived. Welcome to the Trophy Room, a PlayStation show made by the players for the players. I'm your host, Joseph, and today I'm having a review in progress discussion with my good friend Luke Lohr about Assassin Creed Valhalla. I'm going to talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I'm enjoying so far of the game. So, with that said, code provided by Ubisoft. I'm playing this game on a PlayStation 4 Pro, and with all that said, let's start the show. Hey Luke, what's going on, buddy?
It goes well, man. I heard you got Assassin Creed Valhalla.
I do indeed. I played about 20 or so hours so far. I'm pretty deep in the game, but before I give my final review, I want that to be on the PlayStation 5. So right here, right now, this game is running on the PlayStation 4 Pro, and I'm pretty excited to talk about it.
I'm excited to hear really what you think about Valhalla. Before we do that, though, I think it's important to find out how familiar you are with Assassin's Creed. How many of the more recent games, like Odyssey and Origins, have you played? And then before that?
So for me, this is a kind of weird review because it kind of feels full circle. I entered the PlayStation generation, the PlayStation 4, with Black Flag as being one of my favorite Assassin's Creed, one of them that really truly clicked with me. And after that, Unity came out, or Syndicate rather, and none of those really hit until I got to Odyssey actually this year, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It's one of my favorite games this generation. So walking into Valhalla, I have some expectations because I know that this is the Origins team kind of working with the ideas that Origins and Odyssey set before it. So I'm coming in pretty hyped for this game.
And when you saw the coverage and that it would be Great Britain and Vikings, what were your first gut reactions on that?
I'm excited to see what Viking culture is going to look like in a video game that's hopefully a bit more grounded that we've seen in games like, God of War, for example, right? We're studying the culture of the Vikings, the architecture, how these people lived in that time period. And so I'm pretty excited because I don't know much about Viking lore or culture. So this was something that, definitely intrigued me.
And it is in a unique situation given that Assassin's Creed Valhalla is in a blended generation, much like Watch Dogs, where you can play it on your PlayStation 4s, your Xbox Ones, and then you can take that experience into PlayStation 5 or on the Xbox Series set of devices. And with Valhalla, I mean, there's a lot to break down from combat and stealth, which you would expect traditionally with Assassin's Creed. You've got story, the world, and how many pinpoint spots on the map there are. Let's pick one of those and start with combat. How much time have you put into the game, and what were your initial impressions on the combat from the get-go?
So the camera angle is somewhat similar to Odyssey, but a little bit different in terms of it's trying to blend the Odyssey camera with kind of the old time Assassin's Creed, going back to like a Black Flag, where it's kind of pushed back away from the character a little bit more so, where when you're in these big, intense, battle arenas, when you're going on raids as a Viking, you're getting to see the whole landscape in front of the character and around the sides. And it lends itself really well in those situations because you're not fighting the camera and it's not giving you, that weird moments when the camera's stuck to the wall or anything like that. It's giving you a lot of space as the character. And to be honest, it took a bit of a few hours to get used to that. When it comes to the combat, though, it is still very much the R1, R2 light attack, heavy attack that you see in Origins and Odyssey here as well. The cool thing that I really liked and I really dug what the camera did was when you're doing the big finishers, the finishers feel really good and very visceral, very gory. So there are times where you're just lobbing a head clean off and the camera angle will actually swoop down and see that finisher happen, giving you this little inertia rush. Or you'll take a guy's pike and actually impale him with it it's kind of upping the ante from Odyssey.
Let me stop you there before, because that raises a lot of questions. You covered a lot of ground in that. When we look at the camera angle and you talk about it being pulled back a bit more, that suggests that you are kind of in more massive battles, but still playing your small part. And we saw that touched on in Origins and Odyssey a lot with Odyssey, I suppose. In this one, do you feel like you're part of massive battles? Are you part of small groups, or is it really just you versus a group?
It's a little bit of everything. So you're traveling around with your crew, going out and setting out on raids and such. So you're never truly alone, but there are those intimate battles where it's just you and a group of enemies, but sometimes it is like you raiding a village, or those big set pieces where it's like a massive army in front of you. And again, the camera lends itself pretty damn well at all those situations without feeling sticky or anything like that.
Interesting. And so I'm excited by that. A little nervous as far as the change goes, but will Assassin's Creed fans feel comfortable with that camera even though they'll have an adjustment period?
That's a great question.
Well, I question it, and the reason I raise it is it sounds very Call of Duty-esque. You know how every year there's something new about Call of Duty and they're doing this new thing, and then you get into it and you see the new thing, but it's still, Call of Duty feels very comfortable with you. Yeah. And I feel like Assassin's Creed might be doing that as well. And so that's why I posed the question to you.
Yeah. To me, when we took a look at Origins, which was the drastic leap out of what we saw or what we thought of Assassin's Creed, and Odyssey kind of being that evolution, this is just another slight evolution of that camera angle, of the combat that we're seeing. There are going to be people out there that would or do prefer the Odyssey fighting style or camera setup, and there are definitely people that prefer the Valhalla camera over the Odyssey. So, but it is something that I don't know if everybody's going to be over the moon about it.
And it bears mentioning that this could be done, in fact, to account for some of the more impressive visuals we're likely to get on the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series S and X, to be sure. And, of course, you were playing this on PlayStation 4, and so there's a lot to track there. Now, I cut you off right before you started talking about these abilities, and you were describing these visceral finishers, which I can only imagine with heavy weighted weapons and the Viking gore to be rather intense, to say the least. What about abilities? What kind of abilities do you rock?
So I don't want to go too far into the abilities to spoil things, but some of my favorite ones come at the very beginning of this game, one of them being the axe throw. So there's a really cool ability. It's just similar to like in Odyssey where it takes from 300 with the Spartan kick. This one you have just a bunch of axes and you're just tossing them at various people in the battlefield. And right as you get to your last barrage, you take 2 axes and you just throw them at some guy, poor soul's chest, and he just goes flying backwards. There's another one where I just jump right in the air, and I think it's called like a Valkyrie dive. I jump right in the air and I like elbow a guy in the face. Like there's a ton of stuff here. There's even like a charge ability where when I pummel them to the ground, I'm actually using my L1 and my R1 as kind of like a rhythm game to just beat the bloody pulp out of them. And then you have your ranged abilities as well. Some of them, which is pretty cool, kind of like one that's similar to the Red Dead Redemption Deadeye system, where you're just marking a whole bunch of characters on the map to just let loose a ton of arrows. But that's kind of where my fun with ranged combat goes, because to me, where the combat does fall short is it's in the ranged combat. It just doesn't feel that great. It kind of feels very sticky, like it wants you to hit a certain part of the body, and it doesn't really lend itself to, making it the crosshairs go where you want the crosshairs to go. So that's my one big critique in the combat, is that I definitely prefer the Odyssey ranged abilities over the Valhalla ranged abilities.
Interesting. And I wonder if that's due to the weapons that are available to them at the time, or if it's just simply a gameplay mechanic that's, meant to be explained through that. But with the way you're describing a lot of this, I'm getting Kratos vibes, like God of War 2018 vibes to it. Am I reading too far into it, or am I close?
Don't read that far into it. Nothing
that
like
far.
that. No. They do try to do some cool things with range abilities, like with certain enemies, it'll highlight weaknesses on their body so that, you're not just always going for a headshot. Maybe you want to go for a shin or an arm, which does then an extra crit damage and kind of stuns them in place. But no, it's nothing like God of War at all.
Gotcha. Well, talk to me about health, because that's a level scaling and health and how you deal with that in Assassin's Creed has been really changing a lot since we've had that rebirth with Origins. How does it work in Valhalla?
So health is kind of it would be a review if we're not bringing up Dark Souls in some regard.
Unfamiliar with this.
I'd never even heard it in my life. But the health system is really the ration system. And you get rations by, finding food in a village or like berries on a bush. And pretty much as you go, you level up your ration intake. So in the beginning, you start at 1. Right now, I think I'm on like 4 or 5 rations. And that is kind of like your potions. It works like as a blood vial in Bloodborne or an Estus flask in Dark Souls. That's how the ration systems work. So if you use, if you lost a third of your health and you use a ration, that's all your ration. So you kind of have to be a little smart when you're going into combat and when you're out of combat, when you should heal yourself or when you don't, because your health doesn't just regenerate over time. You have to use rations in order to heal yourself.
Interesting. That is interesting. And so we talked combat, and we wouldn't be talking Assassin's Creed, and at least in my world, where health goes down, if we didn't mention stealth. There are a lot of ways to play Assassin's Creed, but stealth seems to be one of the ones that has had a lot of changes over the past few iterations and versions of it. Can I go in guns blazing? Do I have to use stealth? In your 20-some hours with it, where did you land?
So it feels like at this point, Assassin's Creed or the stealth element is kind of just in the name Assassin's Creed. They've really moved away from it to really focus on these big, action, let's lean on RPG like games where the stealth hasn't really improved much going from Odyssey over to Valhalla. And even in certain circumstances, the stealth portions kind of fall short. With that said, you can go in guns blazing or you can solve a situation by like blending into a crowd, which is a really cool element where if you're in a city, they'll actually say distrust. So people will actually look at you going, oh God, is that a Viking? And if you're spotted by, the guards, they'll actually chase you. So you actually put your hood up and your cloak up and it'll actually blend you into the crowd. So you'll have to like take a moment, maybe like there's like a rug and you're just like pretending to fix it up or something like that, just trying to blend it to the crowd to kind of get to your target, which is kind of cool. But other than that, the stealth is still kind of basic, right? Like the AI isn't that smart. It's kind of finicky. Like sometimes I've been caught through walls. So there's just not enough emphasis on stealth in this game. If you're looking for a return to stealth, being the primary, it's not going to be here.
And in Origins and Odyssey, a lot of my setup when I would go into different missions for it, like I would take the Eagle or the Hawk and send it up there and see what I could do to map things out. You were telling me before we recorded about a Raven and the frustration that you had with the Raven. This strikes me as something that's different, something you're not happy about.
Yeah, this is where the game kind of takes a step back from its predecessor. You used to use like the Eagles or the Hawk in Origins and Odyssey is kind of like a UAV, just kind of going over, the fortress or whatever you need to sneak on through to highlight various objects. And you just usually hover over it and it's kind of easy. It's pretty intuitive. Here they take that ability out. And you have to individually ping things on the map, which would be totally fine, but it's so pinpoint accurate where you have to actually, like, if you see an enemy on the battleground, you actually have to pinpoint their feet or else they won't get marked. So there's just a few things in the stealth portion, especially in the Raven, that kind of feel like a step back where now I'm kind of just using my detective vision to kind of scope out enemies as I go. And if I just get caught, I'm just like, well, you know what? Stealth isn't an option. And I just go in guns blazing. So stealth is kind of a bummer here.
That's frustrating to hear in some respects, because I really did enjoy that kind of overlook aspect of it. On the other hand, perhaps it was overpowered, and that's what they were trying to avoid. But I think for many of us, well, going in stealth and ending up guns blazing is par for the course. I'm curious, what difficulty were you playing on to have this experience with the stealth?
So that's where the accessibility options come in, which they introduce you to right off in the beginning. So I was on normal on everything. So there's stealth difficulty, and then you can set that to easy, medium, or hard. And then there's combat difficulty, which sets it to easy, medium, or hard. So it's really cool here that you can kind of, if you have difficulty with stealth, you can turn it up, down, whichever way you'd like to fit your playstyle.
Interesting. That brings that reminisces of Last of Us, where you could adjust different methods and different ways that you wanted to play there. What do you think they intended for you to play the game on?
They definitely intended to play on normal, for sure. Normal, there is plenty of difficulty there. Definitely some challenge to be had, but doesn't take you out of the overall game itself with its difficulty.
So you have the difficulty levels that you can adjust, and that is encouraging. I would imagine also, being that it's Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed, you've got skill trees and ways to level yourself up to push you into different power levels.
Yeah, and I actually think this is probably the highest portion. This is definitely where I see the improvement from Odyssey into Valhalla, where I really like the skill tree here. Instead of having individual little bars or skill trees going upwards, you have these branching paths where at times they intersect with each other. So the one thing that Valhalla wants you to stop doing is going after the loot trace. There's actually not too much loot here in Valhalla. There's just a lot of sets and armor pieces that are actually on the map, and you can actually go over there and sneak your way in or go guns blazing and to get those various pieces of armor or weapons. And the skill trees are there to kind of help level up your character. So it'll give you +5 ranged attack, or +5, melee resistance, or +5 stealth. And then along those branching paths, give you unique abilities as well on top of the ones you already have, which is pretty damn cool. So it really feels like you're leveling up Eivor rather than leveling up his armor.
Interesting. That opens up a lot of doors, I think. It also makes me, part of me is struggling to envision that, and I'm curious to see how it goes, because I am so accustomed to that older setting, or that older style, I suppose, from Origins and Odyssey. Does the story, and I think it's a good way to segue into that, does the story lend itself to upgrading your main character, who you said Eivor was his name?
Yeah. So the cool thing about the story and the character Eivor is, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, as that tends to happen, but
you've had that Alloy character in the other game that you guys play.
Yeah, something like that. If I could pronounce Kratos, I could do Eivor. But yeah, the cool thing here is you get to pick, of course, whether you want to run as the female or male Eivor. Or you could pick an option where you let the Animus choose. So every time you're loading in as either the male or female. And if, let's just say, my playthrough, I was playing in the beginning as the female version, I wasn't a fan of the voice acting. So I switched over to the male version, and I actually liked his cadence and the way he talked a little bit more. So I chose him, and I didn't have to start the game over. It just lets me do it within the menus. So that's a really cool thing about the story. That said, if you are an Assassin's Creed fan and you're in it for that lore, there's a lot of it to be had here. There's not a lot of modern day stuff, which is, I think, for most fans like me, really dig that, but there is that continuation. What's that?
No, I'm excited by that, because if I could be blunt, one of the things that I was so drawn to with Assassin's Creed Black Flag and in Origins and Odyssey as well is not a ton of modern day. That was my least favorite aspect. I've got Watch Dogs if I want modern day versions of Assassin's Creed, so that is encouraging to say the least. What is the basic premise of this story? All I hear, having gone media dark on it, is that I'm a Viking and I'm in Great Britain way back in the day.
And that's, I think, the best part with Assassin's Creed is you kind of take it for what you want it to kind of be. If you want just, I want to turn my brain off and be a Viking, you could very much have that. Without wanting to spoil too much of the story, it is very much a revenge tale turned secret society, kind of like a Spectre in London, where there is a secret society that has snaked its way into Great Britain, and Eivor has to get rid of them. It's kind of a similar arc to that of in Odyssey with the Cult of Cosmos. So it's pretty much a revenge tale meets, you dealing with a secret society of whose motives aren't very clear. But the one thing that I will say is it's a lot more of an Assassin's Creed game than Odyssey because of the time period. You're actually seeing assassins. You're actually seeing the Brotherhood, and you're dealing with them as Vikings, and you're understanding how their two cultures clash with each other, which is really awesome.
The idea of that, like, full-on, blunt method of the Vikings versus the secret, quiet version of the assassin. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yes. And it's a really unique, like, fish out of water type of story there.
That's like asking a samurai to be a ninja.
Exactly.
Where have I seen something similar to that before? Interesting. Very cool. Now, okay, I've been playing Watch Dogs. You've been playing Valhalla. We're talking about Ubisoft, the world, the amount of side missions, the map. How full is the map on Valhalla? Because that was a common criticism for Origins and Odyssey, that there was just too much to do. And at the same time, if you love it, there's a lot to do. Where do we stand on that world?
There is still a lot to do. The worlds are a lot smaller. And when I say that, there are multiple maps in this game. So the one big critique of Odyssey is, the map is way too big. And it is a bit, too much for players. You get overboarded with so much to do that you don't know where to start. Here, they wanted to do something pretty unique, and I haven't seen a lot of games do, which is no quest systems. Like, no quest pings on the map. Whoa. There's no bounty board.
What?
Yeah, exactly. So you're walking into a town, and there'll be, like, little bubbles over characters' heads, and you could be going into a simple conversation, or you could go into, like, let's just say you're at a trading post, and you're talking to someone, that'll lead into a world event, or that'll just lead into a quest itself. For the most part, it works pretty well, because if you're like me, as a person who gets sidetracked often, you're going to find yourself getting very sidetracked rather easily. But it also gives me this weird anxiety, like I'm missing out if I don't talk to someone, or I'm, getting too lost and I want to go back to the beginning. Am I missing out by not talking to that character or not? I would like to just have a pinned version if I wanted there to be, rather than just saying, nope, the whole map is clear, only the objectives and the synchronization points are going to be there. The thing that I like the most, though, because there is no, quest ping system, it's the world events that happen in the game. And again, the little quests that you find in these world events, like I was going to a synchronization point, Luke, and then all of a sudden I just heard a guy groaning. And I'm like, what's over there? And I walk over to this guy, and it starts a quest. And it's a Viking who has an axe lodged in his head, and he doesn't know it. And so I have to break the news to him, or I could just say, it's a flesh wound. Or I could pull it out of his head and, send him to Valhalla. And that's the type of unique little situations or scenarios that you often find yourself getting sidetracked, even if you're in a main mission, just getting sidetracked and then just deviating from the scheduled plan, which is the biggest hook for me of that's what I want in an open world, of kind of like forgetting the world for a second, getting lost in it and kind of having it, take its hooks in me. That's what I want. And that's what this game does pretty damn well.
I'm getting echoes of Breath of the Wild and Witcher, and I don't mean to be exaggerating or say that to anybody that it should be on that caliber of game, but I'm getting echoes of that. My question to you is, oftentimes when I play open world games, Joe, I will pop on a podcast and listen to something, or have something Netflix on in the background. This sounds like I need to be paying a lot of attention. Is that the case?
No, you could definitely turn your brain off and just be like, yeah, I want to do some Viking stuff while, like watching Stranger Things. You could definitely do that for sure. And yeah, it is more echoes of. It's very much taking inspiration of like a Witcher or yes, like a Breath of the Wild. Cause I think that's where open world games are really going. I think these world events are a great start into making the world feel random, because when the world feels random, it feels real.
Interesting. Now, you have in the notes here to talk about something called town building, and I have a lot of question marks in my mind about that. What does that mean in Assassin's Creed?
Yeah, this is the one thing that actually scared me from going into it, because when they're talking about building your own Viking civilization, I'm like, are we getting too Simish? Is this like Sim City now we're entering into? So like that was kind of something that took me out. And when I see open world games try to do that, like a Fallout 4, I kind of just get tuned out of it. It's something that I don't want to partake in. Here, you're moving into England, which means you have to set up shop. And so instead of it making it feel like a sim, it actually feels like you're building the hub world. So it's something that it's a place that you keep on wanting to go back to and improve. So like you could build your armory, and once you build your armory, you can upgrade Eivor's weapons in unique and different ways. You can unlock a shipyard, and you get to customize your ship there. There's just various different things, even like a trading post and etc. So like there's a lot of things to build there, but it kind of feels more like a Destiny hub world more than something that is going to take my time away from Eivor doing awesome things.
Interesting.
I dig it, by the way. I really do dig that. Yeah, it doesn't, because that's my biggest worry when we talk about like town building or world building in that regard, because I feel like if I'm doing menus of the game, that's not fun for me, right? I want to go out there and pretend to be a Viking. I want to go out on raids and such. It doesn't take it doesn't take me out of the experience to play menu the game. It's rather easy, rather simple. And it is actually a ton of fun because you then unlock more unique quests to do, and kind of you're learning more about the people, their culture, their customs as well through the little world building. So it is something I definitely dig, which is a surprise.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Well, so Joe, you're 20 plus hours in on Assassin's Creed Valhalla on a PlayStation 4 Pro. We're on the eve of next gen. You want to give your thoughts there. But let's say that somebody's not able to find a PlayStation 5. Me. And I want to dive into Valhalla. I've got a PlayStation 4 Pro. Is it worth it for me to do? Should I be waiting for a sale? Where do we stand on this one?
This is a really well-built game. And the one thing I almost forgot to say is how beautiful this game is. Odyssey was beautiful. It was a huge open world. There was a lot to do in it, but there was also a lot of loading in that game because the map was so big. And again, very beautiful. You would at times just hit hidden loading screens, or just the game would hitch. This game on the PlayStation 4 Pro does not hitch one bit. It seems solid. It feels solid. It looks absolutely beautiful. It is a great send-off for the PlayStation 4, and I can't wait to see what this game's going to look like on PlayStation 5, because every time I hit a synchronization point in this game, I have to screen cap it. The game just looks so good, and the facial animations as well just look so good. So at the end of the day, there is some give and some take with this game. If I were to rank it with the three previous, Assassin's Creed games, I still think Odyssey's numero uno. So far, Valhalla's number 2 and Origins sits at number 3. I think if you're an Assassin's Creed fan, yeah, I definitely recommend this. If you're out there looking for a new open world game, I really do think this is the one so far. So it's a good recommendation. Just understand that there is some give and some take with it.
Any parting thoughts for us then, Joe? Because it sounds to me like you're high on the game. Like if anybody's on the fence, this should push them over, and they should thoroughly enjoy themselves. A lot of open world stuff to have here, but looks like this is one of the ones to get. Any parting thoughts for us?
Nah, this is the perfect swan song for my PlayStation. That's for sure. And a beautiful swan song it is.
High praise from the host of the Trophy Room. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, guys. Go get it.
Absolutely. Hey, Luke, before we go, where can people find you and your awesome work?
Ha! You can find me on Twitter at InsipidGhost or on any podcast service. Just search Xbox Expansion Pass and you will find an analytical approach to anything and everything within the Xbox ecosystem.
And you can find the Trophy Room here on YouTube. Please hit like, share, subscribe. If you have any comments, questions, cutting room remarks, please leave them down below in the comment section. I'll get right to them. With all that said, you can find the Trophy Room podcast here each and every Thursday where me and my best friend Kyle talk about the latest, the greatest, all things PlayStation, and on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast services, you can find us there. So, with all that said, with all that out of the way, everybody, keep your wits about you, keep hunting, and keep playing PlayStation. Have a nice one.